everyone, and welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary. And on with me today is the wonderful, always happy, always seems to be happy anyway, Brian Geraghty, all the way from Connacht. Hi, Brian.
Hi Mary, hi, how are you?
I'm grand. Brian is a TCRG and an ADCRG, which is an Irish dancing teacher and adjudicator from the next province, Connacht. Tell me, Brian, how's COVID affecting you?
Um, Initially, Mary, COVID was very tough. I found going from like my lifestyle was very, very busy. I was here, there, and everywhere. I was teaching between Roscommon and Dublin, and then traveling with the dancing. As you know, you end up here, there, and everywhere. Australia, America, you name it. They were the places we're in. But then all of a sudden, that just stopped, and it was like nothing. There was just absolutely nothing happening. And the first 2 weeks, to be honest, hit me extremely hard. Um, I didn't know what to do. I was like going, this is not happening. This is the complete opposite to my life. But yeah, eventually after about 2 weeks, then I started to find my head again and kind of going,
Yeah.
well, this is obviously going to be around for a little while. Didn't think it was going to be around for as long as it is. So yeah, I started teaching online then with Zoom and stuff, and um, yeah, I found my feet eventually, but yeah,
How's the
it
Zoom?
wasn't easy.
How's the Zoom going for you? Do you find do you are you a driller or are you somebody that likes making up steps? Because if you like
Yeah,
making up steps and you like
movement.
working with movement and things like that, it seems it's just I'd say a nightmare. Whereas drilling, it seems like it would actually be very good for isolated movements and isolated work.
Well, you kind of had to. After about 2 weeks of it, I started to realize that I kind of had to do things differently. It wasn't my regular teaching, and I started to realize that the whole movement element of it obviously wasn't there. Just to get the kids to face the camera, I did find that it suited some kids a little bit better than others. When we did come out of lockdown for the while we were out and teaching and we were back in the class, some of the kids had improved massively their feet. And
Yeah,
maybe sometimes kids that you may not necessarily expect. Um, um, One kid in particular, it brought her like way on into championship, and it was lovely to see. And if it wasn't for the time that we took on the camera to work on her feet, then I don't know would it have actually have happened. But and obviously then there was others that it didn't suit. There's lots of dancers that like to move around the place, and you know what I mean. It was, yeah, very hard. But we got on with it.
but do
And
you think that that's in some respects, if anything good came out of lockdown for us dancing teachers, it's the knowledge that we've gained another little bit of, if you like, some another element that you can introduce to your class post lockdown. That you can say, well, go home, stand in front of a Zoom, and practice isolating your movements, and don't be. The movement will come, but once the basics are good and
there,
the
yeah,
crossing is good and the turning out is good,
mm,
then start moving. But practice your basics. It's almost like practicing in front of a mirror.
yeah. I'm a sucker for feet anyway.
Yeah, me too.
I just I just love feet, and the feet have to be good, and to get that in a dancer is very, very difficult. So I guess like concentrating on that and on that alone, there had to be positives out of it. So yeah, we definitely gained out of it. But it did affect dancers in different ways, as in like the dancers that really liked to be like movement and energetic and acrobatic, maybe that they didn't concentrate on their feet enough. So
Yeah,
when they got back to the class, then they were kind of they were thinking, "Oh, I'm all turned out now." But then, what was probably nice about them in the first place that made them good and all the energy and all of that, some of that was gone. So it was kind of trying to get it all back and put it
yeah,
all in together. I
yeah,
found that was very hard, and and now we're back in lockdown again. So is it? I'm
But
back
you
on
know,
Zoom.
good basics, but you can't beat good basics. I mean, you can see children and they're moving around the stage and they're beautiful and they're covering every single
Mm,
angle, and half the time they're going right to left on the stage to cover
yeah,
the fact that they've got maybe one
yeah.
straight
Feet
foot that
aren't as
you
good.
can't just get out. But this has actually brought them back to basics. Concentrate on the feet, concentrate on the carriage,
Mm,
concentrate on keeping the arms in so you just can't see anything between the arms, and don't be using,
yeah,
you know, wide sleeves and things like that to cover that. Once the basics are right, the movement,
yeah,
you know, it's going back to basics. And I
yeah,
suppose maybe COVID has, if anything, that's what it has forced people to do, is to use the camera as a mirror
yeah.
to
I
actually
mean,
explore.
a teacher, a good teacher will always bring out the best in a dancer. But sometimes you can only work with what you're given as well, and like you do your best. You know what I mean. If you find that they have the good feet, you'll face them to the front, and sometimes you can try as much as you like to get those feet turned out, but you just may have to turn them to the side at times. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Zoom has helped with the feet definitely, and I'm thinking about the feet a lot more.
Yeah, I look at lovely children dancing, and I think, you know, I haven't seen them once now since they started dancing facing me, and not once.
It's a trick,
They're
Mary.
like that way, and that way, and that way, and that way, and you know you know the tricks that, you know, that you're never seeing somebody face on it until, but but you do when they have extraordinary feet. You're just
When
inundated
I'm
with
when
face.
I'm judging Mary, I, you know yourself, you're trying to look at the three dancers coming towards you. But
Yeah,
quite a lot of the time, you can tell an awful lot from behind. So you'll often see me look like, say, the left leg of the lead or something, and
yeah,
they're heading with their back for you, and you take one look, and you that's where you can really spot the feet. So yeah, the movement is fine, but
or the back
unfortunately, you
foot.
can't hide those feet
Or
completely.
the feet are beautifully turned out, but when the back foot goes back,
Puzzling.
it goes back straight, and then positions itself. Things like that. You know, I'm just there and I'm thinking, oh God, she was gorgeous now. And that, you know, just the straightness of, yeah. I just, but I don't like overcrossing either. I like it to be natural.
I don't like overcrossing if it affects the upper half.
Yeah,
If the shoulders start to go and the head is going to try get the feet
yeah,
across, and
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And the body
to me
goes
that
like,
looks
yeah,
yeah, I don't like that, and it would generally kind of not sit too well with me if I was judging. I wouldn't
yeah.
like to see the body going as well.
Yeah, I like everything to be natural
Yeah,
and relaxed and flowy.
yeah.
And but Brian, how did you start down this manic road of the dance world, Irish dancing in particular?
Okay, so I come from a large family, and my five brothers and three sisters, and I'm at the younger end of the family. So some of the older brothers and sisters danced before me. So dancing wasn't unfamiliar to our house. The area that I lived in, Bin Roscommon, there wasn't any commission schools around at all. So my mother brought, well, actually, a neighbour of mine seen me playing in the playground. I was only 3 at the time. And she said to my mum, and my mother was busy at the time, and she says,
I bet
I
you
think he has something. Yeah, she said, I think he has something. So, um, yeah, she said she'd call and she'd collect me, and she brought me to my first few classes, and I was dancing against her daughter, and I think I did my first fesh, and I think the result went my way.
and you're
and
indignant.
and she didn't call the week after, Mary. So mom was like going, oh my God, I can't leave him sitting at home. I kind of have to bring him now. So she brought me, and then my younger sister started with me, a year younger than me, quite quickly. And we were here, there, and everywhere at competitions. And then my older sister, she started dancing after that. And then my youngest brother, so there was 4 of us dancing at one point. And I can remember at one point dancing at a fesh, Mary, and um, my mother, it was the fesh was in Rosemount, and my mother filled the entire boot of the car with trophies because there was 4 of us. I think we danced in every single competition we could find. But yeah, that was how I got into it. Yeah, and I just loved it. So I was Kogol. I was taught by,
Oh, were you Kogol
yeah,
before?
yeah.
That's
For the first
interesting.
11 years of my dancing, I was Kogol because there was no commission schools in the area because Kogol was huge in Connacht, not anymore, but and in Leinster as well. But
But
uh,
Kogol have a great standard of basics. Their
yeah,
basics,
so
the basics were really good. So your basics were obviously um,
I
on
was
point.
taught Mary by I was taught by the pupil of, I don't know, do you know her or not, but Gertie McCormick.
I heard
Um,
her. I heard
Gertie,
her. Never,
as
yeah.
she's her husband was Faye from the Chieftains, and
Oh God,
um,
yeah.
yeah, so it was a pupil of hers, and she moved to Roscommon from Dublin, and yeah, she was a fantastic teacher. I just I loved everything she did with me as a kid.
Brian, do you think that there should be, I mean, I was talking about, I know, I mean, when I said it to Patrick O'Donnell when he talked about the platforms, but you've come from Kogol, and Dr. John Clonnan, he was saying that we were all Kogol at one stage, and that Cork had this big split, and families stopped speaking to each other, and because some went with commission and some stayed with Kogol, and you could be part of Kogol and you could be part of commission and pay your money to both.
Yeah,
And it's back to what Gary Healy said about him as a lawyer. He can be part of any law group that there is, and law society, and pay his money, and he's registered with this law society and that law society and the other law society, and it all helps him to grow his business because he's part of all of this. Um, and we were part, according to Dr. John, the O'Rourke's and the Nolans, and
it was all one
they were
originally.
all commission and Kogol until Kogol forced them to make a choice. And Cork split. Most went Kogol, and some went. John and his sister went commission. All of Limerick went commission. Now this would have been before I was dancing and or before I was really had any knowledge of commission and Kogol. But do you think that split is, or that having all these groups would be better if we were all able to dance in each other's competitions, or do
Uh,
you think that we're fine the way we are as long as we have a healthy respect for each other's organizations?
yeah, we like each of the organizations has its merits, to be honest. What sometimes what we do mightn't be like by some of the other organizations, and vice versa. I
Yeah.
find that you can probably spot the dancers differently from the different organizations, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, Mary. You've got to like what makes what we do any better than a CRN dancer or Kogol dancer or Weeda dancer. It's about respect at the end of the day. And you know what, Mary? It's our culture, and I don't think any of us have a right to look down on anybody else. At times, I wish, like during COVID here, I do wish that we were all together. To be honest, because
That's what I'm getting at. Do you
we've been
think
let
that
down. We've been
we've
let
been
down.
forced to come together in a sense? I mean, I've interviewed people from other organizations that I never would have known, but for Kogol, and but for the fact that of these interviews and that, and you just kind of think that would businesses be bigger? Would competitions? You're a fesh organizer. Would you, as a competition organizer, appreciate the ability of a Kogol dancer to have an open platform and to come to your fesh and dance, or a CRN or whatever? Do you know, or do you think that it would be too big? I mean, the world would be just
Yeah, the word. I think it would.
too big.
I think there probably would be problems as well if you put it all together. I think like the worlds would go on too long. There'd probably be just too many dancers.
They'd have
And
to cut. They'd have to make less qualifiers
yeah,
in order
they
to do it.
definitely have to streamline it significantly. But from the point of view smaller feshes, Mary, you'll know this. Sometimes we struggle to get dancers out to competitions. If we had more of a pool to pull from,
That's it.
it probably would work better. And there's one of the things about Irish dancing is that, I mean, I think parents expect they expect a lot. So they do. They expect high teaching standards. They expect every fesh to run on time, and they just want it all. And like there's a massive financial
Burden.
burden, and it's a big chance, a massive chance into running any dancing competition, because there's a certain amount of bills that you have to cover, and you just it's gone into thousands, and that is at its minimum.
I don't
Now,
think people realise it
that.
unless they run a fesh. Just how stressful it is not knowing if people turn up.
Trust me, they running a fesh.
And you still got to pay for all the stuff. Do you think it's time now that Ireland got in line with other countries? I've never asked this question to anybody before, but it's just come up from what you said. In line with other countries when it comes to pre-entry, because we've tried it in Munster and we're absolutely it didn't work. People just, or even at least having their names in, but
yeah.
I think, are we gone past the stage where we can expect people to turn up and hope that people will turn up? Or are we grand the way we are?
It's always been done differently in Ireland, Mary. The Irish way of thinking is, I always think, it's just slightly a little bit different to different parts of the world. In Ireland, yeah, we don't think, no, pre-entry doesn't work. It doesn't work. We've all tried it. I did pre-entry years ago when my feshes were kind of off the wall huge at one point, and I was trying this pre-entry thing, and then it's trying, where do you cut it off? And like, it's very, very hard to organize. And then while you could be out the door on this fesh, then the next fesh, you could be begging for entries. It never seemed to work that well for us. And I think with COVID, I think what it has done is made us more organized. So I think even if a little bit of that was to kind of transfer over into the way we run things here in this country, it would be good. I'd like to see it more organized, and I'd like to see some of the risk taken out of it, because the kids do professional and they're struggling at the moment. I'd love to say the kids that I teach are absolutely banging at home without any competitions, but they're not. They love their competitions, and a lot of the kids are just itching to get out there. And
look, anyone that's like us. I mean, I was a competitive dancer. I mean, everything I've done in my life, I've had to compete with myself with. If I did something, I had to have an exam at the end of it to prove. Otherwise, I wouldn't study. Yeah. If I was in competition or if I was dancing, I had to have a competition. I had to have a big audience. I had to have the motivation to actually make me practice, to make me, and it wasn't that I didn't love it. I was passionate about it. But what I loved was the thoughts that at the weekend now I'm going to be on stage and I'm going to be. And I think there's children now who love just going to dancing class for their fun and to meet their friends. But then there's the competitive children who, no matter how much they practice in front of Zoom, the fact that they're not at a fesh, the possibility of winning a competition, the buzz that they get from an audience, that's what I craved, and that's what many children crave. And COVID is affecting that desperately.
I have a big concern that like what you've said there is that you've got different categories of kids who want to do it for fun and whatever, but you got to have all the different categories to be able for it to survive and continue. And like, we love the competition side of it and the buzz out of all of that. But if you skip 18 months down the line and then go, let's remove all of the kids that were doing it for fun, we're massively hit. And the survival of us going forward, I would be worried about.
No, you do you know, you need the children who are not as competitive, and you also need the children who will never be. In your heart, they love dancing. But if they were dancing for the next 20 years, they're not going to be in the recalled a world. They mightn't ever they mightn't ever, bless them, no matter how hard they work, but they might be a doctor. They might be the next person to cure, they might be the person to cure cancer, or be the next surgeon general, or whatever. And there's a place for everyone. But
Mary,
they're not going to be champion dancers, but they love it, and you need them in your class.
Mary, I have a dancer who's danced for me for since I started in Dublin about 4 or 5 years ago, and all the way through her team. Now, she did some competition at first, but she just loved to dance.
Yeah.
She also had she plays camogie as well, and is a top camogie player. Plays for county, and then I think she achieved like 635 points or something in her leaving cert last year, and is going on now to Trinity to study to be a doctor or something. But she will still walk into my class and loves to dance. She doesn't need competition. She doesn't want competition. And I dread if the day came that I could have to turn around and say, do you know what, the class isn't there for you to come to. And I really worry about, at the moment, the Irish dancing has gotten so badly hit with no competitions. The kids, we're losing dancers left, right and centre, and it's making it very, very hard for teachers to continue.
What do you think on that? Are we doing enough?
I think some good work has been done.
When you look, Brian, at what the GAA has done, and I've been pretty hard on Facebook on the GAA, because I'm looking at how they're able to play foot matches, but in fairness, if I put my unbiased hat on, and I think in fairness, as an organization, they have done tremendous work to try and show that they can be out in the air, and that's their, and to get their matches played. Why aren't we pushing it as an organization, if you like,
because
at the same level, to get us out, to get our organization back on it functioning? Or are we doing enough? Can we do any more? Do you think that we have done as much as we can do?
I think at the moment we are, I think everybody's trying their hardest. There's a lot of people shouting. And I think if the people at the top of our organisation at the moment, I'd say, are very extremely concerned. But for me, looking from the outside in, I think the problem was there before COVID.
Yeah.
I think because we're all separate organisations and there was no governing body, we weren't recognised by the Arts Council here in this country, which is unbelievable to think that Irish dancing in Ireland is not recognised. Like,
it's bizarre, Brian. It's bizarre.
It's bizarre. When the Pope arrived in this country, was it just over a year ago, they put a full line of Irish dancers and they filled the whole stadium all the way around with Irish dancers. Every single big event, the Eurovision, everything taken over by Irish dancing. And to think that our government do not recognise us, their art form right now, is, to me, that is absurd.
But do you think that we are wrongly categorized as a sport or as a fitness, when in actual fact I see us as being cultural art, cultural art form? We're in the same way as, okay, yes, we have to be as fit as our dancers, have to be as fit as sports people, but then the likes of Baryshnikov and Rudolf Nureyev and Natalia Makarova, all these great ballet dancers, they were even more fit than, but did they call themselves sports people? No, they didn't. They called themselves artists. They were dancers. They were performers. I think we're completely wrongly categorized. I think we should be an art form, and we should be cultural art form. We're promoting tourism to this country. We're because of Irish dancing, and through Irish dancing, money is coming into this country, and it's been ignored by the government.
Well, at the moment, like for me as an Irish dance teacher, and my job, full-time job, was teaching dancing for the last 10 years. But like, in this country, I pay my taxes the same as everybody else on teaching dancing. So not to be recognized at all, it just, I don't know. And I definitely, I don't like to think of Irish dancing as sport. Yes, it has become. It's because we've gotten very good at what we do. Let's face it. The kids work harder and competition, but it's still Irish dancing. It's still our culture, and how the government of Ireland can't recognise our culture, to me, is wrong. It's wrong.
Look at the money. Okay, they say, oh, the GA is bringing in lots of money, and there'd be lots of money and revenue lost if the GA weren't playing. Look at the money that's lost because of the All Ireland, because of the Munster Championships, because of the Connacht, because of the world. The money that was going to be generated in this country, the tourism that was going to be generated in this country, because of our particular art form. If it was any other art form in any other country, people would be up in arms over it.
Yeah, well,
and we're just
huge money. Like there's no point going into the ins and outs of the figures, but it's absolutely massive, the amount of money that is generated within dancing, all the people that live off it, and all the jobs that are created, and then all the money that's brought in from the outside via the Worlds, the All Irelands, like accommodation, hotels, like you name it, like massive money. So I don't know. It's a bit sad that if anything came out of COVID, I would like to think that somewhere in all of this, that somehow we could be put into the correct category and be recognised somehow. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've always, I've always got an itch when I've heard people describing and saying, our dancers are athletes. They're not. In my eyes, they're not athletes. They're dancers, they're performers, they're artists. It's an art form, and it's a beautiful art form. And I think, yes, they are every bit probably more fit than a sports person, but they're not sports people.
I think that's passion.
And it's not a crime to call them not sports people. It's a crime not to call them artists.
To me, that's complete passion, and that's the love of what they do. And when you love something that much, like we all do, I think that it always makes you work that little bit harder. And you know yourself, when you work harder, then you get the results, and everybody is getting better at it.
When you're bringing something, you're learning something, and you're creating something to music, and you're telling a story through music, through any form of music or any form of storytelling, it no longer becomes sport, it becomes art.
Yeah, and that is why we should be recognised as Irish dancing as a cultural form, and we should be recognised by the Arts Council of Ireland, but it seems that we're not, which is
we're not, and and as you say, Brian, if nothing else comes out of this, it
could get that sorted, it'd be good.
Classified as as what I've always seen us as, in the same way as I trained as an artist, and you're starting with a piece of clay, and you're creating from one piece of clay, you're creating a vase or whatever, you're creating a structural piece. You're creating art. The same with a dancer and a teacher combined. They're starting with an idea that turns into a step, that turns into a beautiful 3 minutes of performance, or longer, as in the case of all the shows. And that's art as well. It's story.
Mary, you asked me earlier about what I've been doing during lockdown. In the last couple of weeks, the last maybe 4 weeks, I've started actually creating art. I actually have a couple of bits here that I'd like to show you. I don't know if you've seen them now or not.
But to bend down and pick up my cup of tea.
I've set myself up a little Facebook page or an Instagram, and I've started doing some wall art. And I've always been
fabulous.
I've always been into my originally when I went to college, I did like architectural technology and construction and interior design, a lot of that. So with some of the time off, I have been thinking of other ways to try to keep myself busy. There's only so much
That's
television I
another
can watch.
positive that's out
I'll
there.
show you something here now. This was my first piece, Mary. So it's called Snowflakes.
Oh, Brian. Oh my God, I love it.
So I have any amount of stuff that I'm after making in the last.
Oh, Brian, that'd be gorgeous. That'd be gorgeous on our wall here.
And I've been just doing some frames in for some other people. It's like
look at that.
Larry Dancing is in there. And
oh, I love the first one.
A couple of simpler ones in as well. Just
fabulous. I love the frames.
Yeah, so I didn't want all of the pieces, Mary, to be completely off the wall where people weren't looking for them. But the last month,
you can see the architectural. You can see the architecture in your work, even there. Do you know the proportions and and the placements of
anything that's arty, anything that's creative? That's kind of me.
I love your table behind, Brian.
We're very lucky here. We live in, you probably can't see it there now, but we live in directly to the canal just right outside, and then we're looking out onto the Phoenix Park, and we have a lovely terrace here as well. So during the summer, during lockdown, that was always great to have. What's that?
You're actually in Dublin?
Yeah, so I live in Dublin. I'm married and live in Dublin.
I thought you were. I didn't realize you'd moved to Dublin.
No, I used to live in the city. 7 years ago, I've actually more 8 years ago, I moved to Dublin City. There wasn't a lot for me, Mary, in Roscommon, to be honest. I was kind of in the process of finding myself, finding my life, finding kind of my friends and social outlet as well.
Continuous journey trying to find yourself. I'm still trying to find myself.
About 6 or 7 months into that, Mary, I went on a random night. I'd been in Australia teaching.
Yeah.
Missed all of Christmas. And I thought, oh my God, what I love about Christmas is family and going out and all the things we probably won't get to do this year. But I ended up staying in Australia for Christmas, and I missed all of Christmas. So when I came home, I thought, I'm going to go up to Dublin. I was living in Roscommon at the time. I'm going to go up to Dublin, booked myself into a hotel, went on a random night out, and I met Rory Hughes.
The love of your life.
So he's been very busy during lockdown as well.
That's your wedding?
Yeah, that's 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago now.
Where's Rory from?
Rory's originally from Pittsburgh in the States, Pennsylvania, yeah. But he's living in now. He has a lot of Irish family. His dad is from Belfast originally, and his mum's side is American. So yeah, he's been very creative during all this. He set up a new company called Boom. 2 days into the lockdown, he started these online classes for everything got to do with theatre or performance. He has been basically on there, and he's had some huge big stars.
So that's actually a marriage made in heaven when you think about it. Both performers.
Yeah, well, I have to say I've been lucky. I have been lucky.
Yeah, he seems lovely. Actually, that was my first time meeting him there a few minutes ago. I've seen lots of photographs of him, but.
We've seen an awful lot of each other, Mary, and we're both still alive.
You're both still alive. You haven't killed each other yet.
I know.
Jesus, do you know, that's another thing, Brian. I mean, do you know, okay, I was listening to the debate last night. I stayed up to listen to the debate. And one thing that, and I have to say what Donald Trump said was right. You know, the cure can't be worse than the disease. You know, when you look at people who are forced to live with each other through this COVID, and they're in violent relationships, it must be absolutely horrendous to be forced to stay in the one house all day long and have no way of escape from somebody that you just don't get on with. You're fortunate that you're with.
It hasn't been easy.
That you haven't killed each other yet.
It hasn't been easy, because my regular week before this was like I was teaching in Roscommon, so even though I'm living in Dublin, I was going down there 2-3 days every week to teach, and I still do. And then I was coming up here, and so we always had a nice balance of time together, and then a bit of me time, and it always worked so well. The last lockdown, the weather was extremely good. So, and situated where we are beside the park and the canal and all that, we were able to go for walks. We were able to get out of the house. Not as much now because it's a little bit colder, and yeah, you can still go on your walks, but you are in the house a lot. So you really do, it is harder. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, it does put pressure on your relationships, I'm sure. And then if you add financial into that for families, and, people
Brian,
losing their
it's going
jobs,
to be
not as crazy.
catastrophic. It's going to be catastrophic for businesses.
One of the things I found extremely hard.
I'm a firm believer that if they had actually closed down the ferries, closed down the airports, the flights are still coming in and going out. If they had just left cargo flights in, and if they had closed the border, as politically incorrect as that sounds, it should have been done from day one for 10 days.
Yeah. Mary, I'll give you an example of that.
New Zealand did it.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. I think this half lockdown situation doesn't work. I think it should be actually lockdown or not. I do a workshop for a lovely lady in Australia, and she lives in Perth. And as you know, Perth is very far west, and it's kind of cut off from the rest of Australia. And it's to get there, everything needs to be shipped there, or it needs to be flown there, or put on trains. So because it's so far out, I was speaking to that same lady about a month ago, and she told me, and I noticed it from Facebook, they have no cases at all. There's no cases.
No.
Cases. There's nobody dying because they don't have anybody coming in. They don't have anybody going out, and they controlled it within their own sector. And they did, I think, what we should be doing, but we're not.
Well, we should have done it from day one, Brian. We should have done it. The people in this country have been put into penury because of mistakes that were made. I mean, New Zealand, Australia, you could travel. I've never been to either, but from what I know of it, you could travel for days and not see another person because it's so big and so underpopulated. And Dublin, you have massive population. London, you have massive population. The solution was simply to actually lock up everything, give everybody a certain length of time to get to flights into their respective countries, and say by the 23rd you have to be in. Anyone after that, if you come in, you've got to stay at the airport hotel. Should have been turned into a quarantine center for people coming in, and you have to stay there for 10 days, and you cannot go back to your homes. But to tell people coming in, okay, go home and quarantine. Meanwhile, those people were getting on buses, getting into taxis, getting into cars, going into shops to get cups of coffee on the way home. And then they were quarantining when they got home. I mean, even to somebody who's not the most logical person in the world, that seemed irrational to me.
I wouldn't agree with that. That you're not logical, but anyways, go on.
I'm not. I'm what Jacques Derrida would call a deconstructionist. I think I'm a deep thinker, okay, but whether logic comes out from my deeply thinking, I'm not quite sure.
That's okay too. But from the lockdown point of view, I think it should be full lockdown or none at all. And to be very honest with you, I can.
Late now.
I can, yeah. But at the moment, I can half relate to some of the people who've kind of got peed off with like they're putting us into a lockdown, but it's not a lockdown, and they're like some things are open, and it's not fixing the problem. It's having a huge effect on the economy. It's having a huge effect, but I don't see what it's fixing. I think it might slow it down a bit, but it could have been done better.
I mean, Brian, in situations like this, and I suppose our station is very much focused on trying to hear both sides of every argument in that. And there is an argument from so many scientists that you would never, ever in a million years ask somebody that was healthy to quarantine or to lock down. What you're trying to do is build people's immune systems up and the only way to do that is to go out and get fresh air and get vitamin C and vitamin D. And
Mary,
the old people that have been locked up in nursing homes, it's just frightening. I mean, they haven't seen a breath of fresh air in months.
yeah,
Of
Mary,
course they're dying.
can
There
I
is
tell you what probably the hardest part of this lockdown for me is? I mentioned to you there before that on a regular week I would spend 2 to 3 days in Roscommon, okay? And my mother is 80 years of age and she lives in her house alone, okay? And while I have two sisters that live close by in Roscommon, they both have families, they both have kids, they both have jobs, they both have commitments. My mother would rely on me probably a little bit more, and then on the two sisters as well. But to be left sitting in your own house, and as my mother would say, looking at the four walls. She has this great saying
my
of
mother
looking
used
at
to
the
say
four
that.
walls. Um, and she did it because she had to. But the mental effects of that is
It's
unreal.
horrendous. It's horrendous, Brian. It's horrendous, and it's not now. It'll be seen. It's later on. The cure cannot be
Yeah,
worse than
so
the
she's
disease.
back in her house now in lockdown. I haven't seen her in a month, because we were put into lockdown in Dublin first, so I couldn't even go down home. I have a brother-in-law who's very sick with at the moment, and my mother had an operation when they reopened up the hospitals. So, and my mother was back in hospital again only 2 days ago. So like the elderly people, they need us, and I don't. I just think that the mental effects on this on everybody, and like you say, even people who were in the best of their health and in the full of their minds, at the end of the day, at the end of this, what are we going to be looking at? Like I don't think people realise how much effect it is going to have on people.
I mean, I'm an only child, and I was always used to my own company. But I always had, say, dancing, and I always had Bunratty and Bunratty Castle. And then when you're on your own all the time, you can always find something to do. But when it's enforced on you, that's a vastly different. I'm an only child who can enjoy my own company, but I know if I want to go down to my friend's house, she's less than 5 minutes from my house. She's my friend since we were four. She lived in Libya for 30 odd years, and she's been back for the last few years. But we never lost contact. We were the type of friends who could pick up after 5 years, maybe not seeing each other, and it was like we saw each other yesterday. But knowing that I wasn't able to even go down to her,
See her, yeah.
and knowing I hadn't got a choice, that the choice was taken away from me. Now that's magnified when you're an old person. My colleague here, he's from Cork. His mother is 91. She's got Alzheimer's. She's in a nursing home. The only voice she knows is her son Billy, who was her carer. He was carer for her and her husband. Her husband's at home, but she's in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. She hasn't seen them in months, and I cannot begin to tell you, Brian, the visible deterioration in that woman, and it makes me so angry. I saw her at Christmas, and the visible deterioration. She has not been outside of her bedroom in months in the nursing home. They haven't a TV on for her.
Yeah.
There's no mental or emotional stimulation because they feel, well, they're so busy with other patients. But there's patients in the nursing home that are of sound mind who must be going completely insane, unable to see their families.
And the danger is that how long more is it going to go on for? There needs to be something done about it now. And it definitely needs to be structures put in place for the older people. And I don't know what the situation is with the nursing homes. I think that's just got totally out of hand how it ended up that way in the first place. And a lot of people, like I have spoken to so many dancing friends over the last couple of weeks and months, and several people have lost either parents or relations in nursing homes and or in hospitals or in care facilities, and like the effects of that, and then like people who have had people pass on in the I really feel for the families for even not if it's to the nursing homes, like we know of people in the dancing who have lost relations and not even able to have a funeral, or the
Not even
great thing in the
with them
dancing
when they
world,
die.
yeah, not being able to be with them, yeah,
I mean, it's morally bankrupt. It
yeah,
really is. And I mean, as one woman said in England yesterday when she was being interviewed, she says, "I'm 84. I don't want to spend the rest of my life," she said, being locked up. She said,
yeah,
"I've never been sick a day in my life." And
yeah,
they make an assumption because someone reaches the wonderful age of 80 that they're any more vulnerable than somebody young who happens to be sick all the time, or a
yeah.
hypochondriac who's always sick. Whereas some elderly people, I think my father was only 59 when he died, but in the 59 years that he was on this earth, he was never in hospital.
My father was 52 when he died. I was only 17.
God.
Um, yeah, but the one thing about the dancing, though, Mary, is that like we have our own little bubble, and we
We
have
have
this
our own
great.
bubble.
We have our own little bubble, and we have all these friends and all these people we get on so well with. And when it comes to times like this, it is great to have all of that around you. But I don't think that the people in the dancing circle, I I don't like mentioning names, but I mean, Gavin lost his dad at the beginning of all of this.
That's
And I'm
right.
sure that if the dancing world could have shown Gavin, you know what I mean, that the love there is for both him and his dad. But it was, I know people sent messages and but
It's
it's
not
it's
the
not
same.
fully the same. It's
Not
not
the
the
same.
same.
I
Not the
mean,
same.
we as an island people in general like to see the person off. John Sanders the other
Oh
day.
my God, I
John
was
used to
shocked.
John used to call to my house and often on his way home from work because he knew I was a night owl and I was always on the computer. And at the time, I was trying to finish my PhD, and I'd be up until all insane hours. And John would be coming in from the bar that he worked in, and he'd text me and he'd say, "Are you up?" And I'd say, "I am." And he'd say, "I'm coming in for tea." And he'd come in and he'd start dancing, and he'd be showing me, "Do you like this step or
Yeah,
that step?" And
he's a very passionate guy, and
he was so
and
passionate, and to not
he,
be able to go to his funeral was
yeah. Well, to me, I found that very hard. I started going to his feshes from the very beginning of when I
yeah,
started bringing
I was
kids to the fesh
helping him.
first, and which is probably about 15 years ago. You remember that lovely Christmas fesh
Yeah,
that
the
he
lovely
ran down?
Christmas.
It was
And
in
he used to
Newmarket and
love
Fergus,
him. He used to go all out with his dad,
all out with it.
Santa
Yeah,
Claus.
yeah. And I mean, he was all about the kids, and I mean, like at the end of the day, that's what I mean. I think he's going to be really, really missed, and I feel so sorry and bad for his family and his friends.
And Brian, I studied. My research was all about trauma, I suppose, and the effects of deportation and the effects of forced deportation and death on
Yeah,
people, not just as it happened, but the long-term effects, the effects it has not just them, but on their families later on. It's not now that all this is going to affect people, say in the dancing world, but it's later on when you look back and you think all the things that you missed out on as a people and as us as a group, as a smaller group within, I suppose, Ireland as a whole. What you missed out on, the fact of not being able to go to the funerals of, say, like Gavin's dad or
yeah,
John Sanders and people like that who have died, that you would ordinarily have gone to their
yeah,
funerals.
yeah. That was that. I just find it all very, very, it was very, very sad. And I know people have tried to show their support in different ways through COVID, but there is. I lost my dad when I was only 17, and I can remember because my dad was a big GA person, and um, I can remember the strength that I gained from the amount of people that turned up, and it's just everybody was there for you, and there's an awful lot. Like when your community comes and they all gather around you like that, that's huge, and that's the kind of thing that you need as a part of the grieving process. And all of that has been removed in this. So I kind of worry that this. the long-term effects it's going to have on people. But and then you've got to get away from the morbid side of it, the effects it's going to have on the kids who can't they can't do their hobbies. A lot of the kids in my class have only dancing. What are they
That's it.
doing?
That's
Yeah,
it. That was my world. That was my world.
yeah,
And when you look on, and there are children there who it is clearly their world. They don't
yeah,
want
yeah.
anything else but
We've had
dancing.
we've had great lives out of it, Mary. I mean, like, what other job where you can just hop on the plane and fly off somewhere to the next competition, or doing a workshop, or judging somewhere for a long weekend, and all the social side of it. Like, we've had.
Yeah, well, you've had more. You've had, but you're more popular than I am.
I totally
You
love
get
it.
more competitions than I. I mean, you're. Yeah, but
That's a very subjective thing to say.
but the thing is, how did you go down the road of teaching?
I'm
When
teaching.
what was this moment that you said, I have to? This is going to be my career for the rest of my life.
It didn't really happen like that,
But you
Mary.
know, it is an organization that you can be in from the cradle to the grave. and,
Yeah,
and there's very few jobs that you can do that.
yeah,
And that it comes back again to the arts, because
yeah,
to it being the arts, because dancers, musicians, singers, there's never an end for
yeah,
them. They can do it into their 80s. They may not be physically able to do it into their 80s,
yeah.
like
Well,
a
Mary, I do love commission. I always see myself being part of it, and I can't see myself never been in dancing. I ended up getting into it because, to be honest, I'd done shows and stuff, and then a friend of mine told me about this job. It was in an architect's office, and it was in Roscommon. So I started into the job, and I wasn't long in the job when a colleague of ours, actually, Claire Farrer, Claire McMorrow
yeah.
from Leitrim, and we were we were at a show one night. So I was part of a local performance, and we toured around with it, and it was performing up the road from where Claire lives. So when we went in, performance was over, and Claire said to me, "God, Brian," she says, "did you ever think of teaching dancing?" And I said, "Funny now, Mary, that she said that, because 2 weeks previous to it, the area again where I lived in, there was, I think it was like 5 different Kogol teachers over a short period of time. And this whole class of dancers, I think it was like 23 or 25 dancers, they needed to be taught by somebody. And a parent of one of those dancers had asked me to teach them, but I wasn't qualified to teach Irish dancing at the time. And Claire Farrer said to me, she says, "Oh God, Brian," she says, "don't turn down the chance of that." She says, "Sure, I could be working for years to build a class up to 25 kids." So so I did. I took the class. I started to teach them, but at the same time, Claire put me in touch with Mary McElroy, um, here in Dublin,
Yeah.
and I was going to Mary McElroy's classes. And Mary McElroy judged my first fesh. I grew the 25 into like 75, and then the next class fesh, Mary came with two friends of mine, and it was like 200 beginner kids, and that was where it all started and grew from. And you know yourself, out of when you've got a pretty good number like that.
I reckon I should have got into the car and driven to Roscommon, Brian.
So there was talent in there, and yeah, it was picking them out and then getting them out and putting them into the competitions. And I started off the Roscommon Fesh, and it just all kind of grew from there. And just, as you know, it just
That's
get
another
to go.
thing, you think, oh God, I mean, you'd never hear of really of a teacher just getting into the car and driving to Roscommon, or from Limerick to Roscommon, or from Cork to Roscommon. But I think it was Jan Curry Henderson said to me that when she came to Ireland one time, somebody brought her on a trip, and they had factored in staying overnight, and it was only going
Yeah,
to take about an hour and a half to get there, or 2 hours to get there. And she thought, oh, this is just so strange, because it could take us a day or 2 days to get from A to B, and we do it and get back in the car and come home. Distance is nothing to Australians, but the idea that you'd get in Limerick and you'd go 5 days a week from Limerick to Dublin to teach dancing class would be unthought of. But yet to an American, they get onto flights and they travel every day of the week to a different state to teach dancing.
Well, at the moment there, Mary, I teach with the Mulherns, who are from Chicago. So we have a leg at the school there as well. And on their regular week, every Wednesday, either Eileen or Colleen would get on a plane and they fly to Minnesota. So they do it. So they take turns once every week, and that's just normal and that's just natural for them. So that's I couldn't see it happening here in Ireland, but that's just
we're just lazy here.
Thing.
I think at 120 miles is, oh God, we'll have to stay Limerick to Dublin. We'll have to stay overnight. Well, what? They're looking at you like, oh, I do that in 7 days a week.
I think at the moment my car, Mary, just goes on autopilot between Dublin and Roscommon, and it's nearly 2 hours, but I would do twice a week, no problem.
Yeah. So what's the next move for Brian Geraghty? Are you're obviously stuck now in the house yourself and Rory?
Well, yeah. At the moment, stuck here in the apartment, Zoom classes all of the time. Nearly every day, and on Sunday we do an international class with Eileen and Colleen, so all the kids come on and they do a class on there. During lockdown, I also got myself some extra qualifications because I love working with kids, as you know. I decided to do a special needs course, so a special needs assistant in schools. So I'm currently looking at some.
You're doing what Boris Johnson is advocating in England, and I think it's just awful to say, oh, you might, all artists might have to retrain, and you're thinking only a non-artist, only a non-creative person would suggest to a creative person that they've got to do a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, well, now to be honest, I did it out of complete fear of that the dancing would go completely. And while I do love working with kids, so you know what I mean, I think it's something I'll probably be good at, probably be a little bit more secure. But I couldn't see myself at it for life, to be honest. There's lots. I have other little things in the pipeline. I had started into making Irish dance dresses just before all this started. The run up right into lockdown was crazy. We had teams, we had figures. I was making all the dresses for all of those teams and figures, and I was absolutely loving and enjoying the process of making them, designing them, and making them from absolute scratch. So, like the fact that they never made the stage was a little bit of a disappointment. But I definitely will go back there at that in the future when the market returns. I have to say, hats off to the people who are doing it now.
It has to return. It absolutely has to. People, I'm fully convinced, and you know, might not.
It will return, Mary. It will. It'll take time.
Look, you know, we can't be locked up for the rest of our lives just because they can't find. And even if they did come up with a vaccine in the morning, there's no guarantee that it'll suit everybody. So nobody should. My belief is that people shouldn't take the vaccine until, and I mean, you know, I mean, it's not going to suit everyone. It's the same as every time I get the flu vaccine, I'm asthmatic, and I'm always forced to take the flu vaccine, and I die out with the flu. I die out with the flu after the flu vaccine, and I don't have it until I take the vaccine. So
my mom as well.
You know, so like, you know, I think people will panic and a vaccine will come out, and it's happening in China. People are being forced to pay $27, I think it is, to get this vaccine. And it's only a test vaccine, and God only knows what's going to happen. I think people have to be very careful, and I just think we're going to have to be cautious. But people are going to have to get back to work because the suicide rate, the depression rate, the domestic violence rate is you know, these are underlying problems.
Mary, you started this whole interview off with that I'm always smiling and stuff, and like the telltale sign for the whole world and the country is is when you see smiles on people's faces, and that's where I found it particularly hard. I don't see people smiling as much anymore, and I'm a kind of a people person. I like to
You're a glass half full.
yeah, I like to be positive, but yeah, when it's had such, I would be lying if I said that it hasn't had effect on me. I have found it extremely difficult, and I've had some, you know, some very down days since this started. I've never had to deal with any of this type of thing before, but you know what? There's such great things in people's lives, and you've got to keep reminding people of the good. Um, and I think even if a vaccine does come, Mary, we're going to have to learn how to um, live with it,
Yeah,
because it's going to be here in some shape or form. So if we could do a little bit more of the positive
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
everybody and try get everybody back on track, I
I think
think
people
that's
need
the way
to
to
be
go.
positive. I think we have to, you know, I mean, there's so much negativity around it. I think people just need to get on with living, and in the same way as they've never beaten flu, they've never come up with a cure for flu. It's always there.
Yeah,
It TB is there in some form in some parts of the world. Um, you know, it's always going to be, and we're going to have to learn to live with it
yeah,
even
yeah.
after a
So
vaccine.
it's to learn how to live with it and to try and look at the positives. And you know what, it kind of it is what it is, but it maybe it might make people think a small bit more about silly stuff that they probably didn't think of previously to this. And I find it very hard at the moment because again, I'm a kind of a I regard myself as a friendly person. I love giving somebody a hug or meeting people now and having to keep your distance, and you can't show your, you know, your
I know, it's
appreciation, your
very
affection.
hard.
I find that very weird myself.
I'm a hugger.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
always been a hugger, um, I find it very hard because I automatically go for the hug.
yeah,
Then you're kind of saying, "Cheers," and this stupid thing of,
yeah, yeah.
you know, I mean, just go away, don't elbow me. I mean, what was a very rude thing to do before is now
It's now
supposed to be
okay.
politically correct. If someone elbowed you before, you'd consider it an insult. Now it's just, you know, it's just. But do you know the one thing that it has done, and I hope that these interviews have done, is that they've given us all, they've stopped us in our tracks and made us look at our colleagues beyond a fesh, beyond
Yeah.
looking at them and thinking, oh, he has trained, identifying Brian Geraghty or identifying
Mm,
whoever as,
yeah.
oh, they have had, they trained world champions, they've trained world standard championships champions, they're blah blah blah, defining a person by
A
what
talent,
they've
a
achieved
person.
in dancing.
Yeah, yeah,
Now we're looking at people, and I hope these interviews are doing it, we're looking at the Brian Geraghty, the human being behind the
yeah.
dancing, what makes you tick.
Yeah, like I said, Mary, we have been fortunate to live very, you know, very nice lifestyle in this, you know, this like again, you can like you're traveling and you're working, and especially when it's something that you love doing. But like remove all of that, and yeah, there's people behind
We're
the
all
facade,
flawed.
and
We're
yeah,
all
hard.
representative of flawed humanity, Brian. We
Yeah,
try to create this aura of success in our lives, that, you know, we can do it when we're amongst our own people, our own group of people. You define Brian Geraghty as a champion teacher, or you define this teacher as a world champion. Oh, who is she? Oh, she's had multiple world champions, or they've had multiple world team
person.
dancers. But who is the person behind the the outward persona of Brian Geraghty? And that's what I'm trying to
Yeah, well,
show.
I like to the whole creative side of me is always there. I've always done a little bit of something got to do with be it interiors or design. I love all that stuff. But I think it's all based on a lot of it is all based on contact with people as well. And
Yeah,
so that's why I think I found this lockdown situation particularly hard, because the one thing that I thrive off is, and that I love, is talking to people, and sometimes I talk too much, but that's who I am.
Never, 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 never. You can
Um,
never talk too much.
and I just I love the social interaction, and I just love being on the road and going places and meeting people and doing things. That's really me. So it is. So to put me into a situation like we've had, it definitely has big effects. So I personally would love to be able to get back to normality, because that's what makes me tick.
But you're a creative person, Brian, and creative people tend to have to find ways of projecting their creativity in a multitude of ways. And even though you've been forced into a lockdown situation, your creativity has found an outlet through your art
Yeah,
and through your ability to find alternative ways of of telling your story, whether it's on canvas or whether it's even to do another course to actually
yeah. I mean,
work with,
like,
with special needs.
yeah,
And it takes
it,
a very special person, Brian, a special human being, to actually work with people with special needs, to be
yeah.
able to have
Well,
that patience.
I do have a niece. Again, it's all from personal experience. I do have a niece who's had the need for a special need assistant within the classroom, and I mean, she's thrived off that. She needed it, and she is living an absolutely um, perfectly normal life, and is actually did her junior cert and did absolutely fantastic in it and got absolutely incredible results. But with the help of a special needs assistant within the classroom. Now,
Yes,
I mean, anybody, I don't know how anybody who couldn't give help to somebody else and didn't feel good about it, how, how why you would shy away from that. I love personally as well working with the kids within the classroom, seeing the teaching element of it and the dancing. I've always found that I'm very good with, especially the little ones. And yeah, so I would love to do it within primary school. I'm looking at getting a position, hopefully permanently within a primary school shortly. I have to be careful where it is, because of I want to keep the dancing going as well, obviously. So, but I find I am attracted
as
to
a
the younger
special
kids.
needs as a special needs teacher, is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I have
Yeah, but
many
you can
friends.
always do the dancing as part of it.
Yeah, it works perfectly with the teaching. I mean, it's a much shorter day, and you would get a couple of hours to yourself, and then you'd be able to go in and you'd be able to teach. But again, like I said, I have to be careful where I would take a position like that, because the dancing is number one for me. So I'm gonna, I'm always going to be doing that, and I need to be able to get to my classes and stuff. But I'm not afraid of the car, you know that. So I'll drive if I have to. My poor car is on autopilot.
Yeah. Well, Brian Geraghty, it's been exceptional. It really
Thank you.
has. I know I say that, but it has been exceptional talking to you. It's been, just complete, utter, relaxed, natural chat. And that's what I like. When I
Um,
mean, everyone that has come on has been so just full of conversation
yeah.
and and
Um,
and, and relating their and looking and excited about telling their story. And
yeah.
everyone's
Well,
story has the same ending, the same passion, the same love for Irish dancing, different journeys towards the one um, conclusion that we're all at.
yeah. Can I just say thank you, Mary, for providing the outlet for us to be able to tell our stories, and on a personal note, I just want to thank all the people in dancing who've been very good to me recently. Um, Friends are important, and I know when we first met, we always got on. We're
Yeah,
not the type of friends that were on the phone to each other all the time, but we were always able to say, whether it was at a party of Linda's or that, we
yeah,
would
Linda's
always sit down.
parties are epic.
We're Linda's without our parties.
I mean, I'm not. I don't drink. I never drank in my life, but I'm always the last in, the last out, and always the one,
Yeah,
the designated driver. There's
yeah,
always a role for me.
yeah,
I have my role in life, and it's as a designated driver. But I love being around people who are in party mode.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Well, yeah, we've been at a few of those.
yeah,
So
we've been at
yeah,
a few of those.
Thank you, Mary. Fair play.
You're very welcome, Brian, and
best of luck with
continued success. Forward. And once we get back to COVID, we'll have to go for a drink.
We'll see each other.
I'll drive you.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
I'll drive you. Bye, Brian, and bye to Rory.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well done, Shannon. Well done.